Disclaimer: this story is a fictionalized account inspired by true events. Any resemblance to actual persons, families, or situations is purely coincidental. The story contains sensitive themes of betrayal and family conflict which may be distressing to some readers. Reader discretion is advised. When I first met Mark, I felt like I had finally found the life I had always dreamed of. He was kind, successful, and most importantly, he had a son, Ethan, who I was eager to love and care for as my own. We blended our lives together with hope and excitement. Our home was full of laughter, celebrations, and what seemed like a deep bond between all of us. To the outside world, we were the picture-perfect family. Mark and I were the loving couple, and Ethan was the respectful, bright teenager who adored his parents. Friends often commented on how lucky we were to have such a strong family unit, and for a time, I believed it wholeheartedly. I had spent years searching for a family that felt like home, and I thought I had finally found it. Our weekends were filled with family outings, dinners, and movie nights. Mark and I worked hard to create a warm, nurturing environment for Ethan, ensuring he felt secure and loved. I watched him grow into a confident young man, proud of the progress he was making at school and in his hobbies. Yet, beneath the surface of this happiness, there were tiny cracks I failed to notice. The late-night phone calls Mark took in the other room, the brief silences that fell over dinner, and Ethan's subtle withdrawal from family activities, all of it felt odd, but I chose to ignore these signs. I wanted so badly to hold on to the ideal of our family, I brushed away my doubts and fears. I told myself that every family has its ups and downs and that our love would carry us through anything. But deep down, there was a small voice questioning the reality behind the smiles and hugs. I thought maybe it was just stress or teenage moodiness. Little did I know, those moments of quiet tension were the first warning signs of something far darker, a secret that would soon come crashing into my life and tear everything apart. The illusion of our perfect family was about to shatter, and I wasn't prepared for the storm that was coming. At first, I tried to dismiss the strange feelings that had started to creep in. But as days passed, the unease grew heavier in my chest. I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong in our family, something I wasn't supposed to see. Mark's behavior became increasingly secretive. He started locking his phone and deleting messages. When I asked about it, he shrugged it off as work stress or harmless chats with friends. But his eyes would avoid mine, and there was a tension in his voice I couldn't ignore. Ethan's attitude changed too. He was quieter at home, often disappearing to his room for long stretches. He stopped inviting me to join him in his hobbies, and when I tried to talk to him, he gave vague answers or just nodded without really listening. One evening, I overheard a brief conversation between them in hushed tones that made my heart sink. Their words were cryptic, but there was something too intimate, too loaded about the way they spoke. I tried to push the thought away, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the growing silence between us was deafening. The warmth in our home faded, replaced by cold looks and uncomfortable silences. The smiles became forced, the hugs brief and awkward. I found myself watching them closely, looking for answers in every glance and every word. I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. The family I had built, the one I had dreamed about, was slowly slipping through my fingers. The bond one once believed was unbreakable now felt fragile and strained. Despite the gnawing suspicion, I hesitated to confront them. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. I didn't want to be the one to shatter the peace. But every day, the signs grew clearer, and the weight of the secret pressed down harder on my heart. Late at night, I found myself scrolling through messages I wasn't meant to see, piecing together fragments of conversations that made no sense. Every discovery hurt, but I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth, even if it meant facing a nightmare. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage built on lies. And I was trapped inside, watching the family I loved slip further away from me. Little did I realize that the moment I was about to stumble upon would change everything, breaking the trust one had so carefully built and tearing our family apart forever. That day started like any other, but it ended with a moment that changed my life forever. I had just come home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Mark and Ethan. The house was quiet, with the usual hum of everyday life missing. I called out to them, but there was no answer. Curious and a little concerned, I decided to check upstairs. As I slowly opened the bedroom door, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. There, in the dim light, was Mark and Ethan, in a way I never imagined possible. They were holding each other, sharing an intimate moment that wasn't just a hug between family members. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to collapse in an instant. I stood frozen, unable to look away or speak. Shock and disbelief consumed me. I kept asking myself, is this really happening? Could this be true? It felt like a nightmare, something from a twisted story that I wished I could wake up from. I quickly closed the door and retreated to the living room, tears streaming down my face. My mind raced with confusion, betrayal, and heartbreak. How could they do this to me? To our family? To the love and trust one had poured into this home? That night, I barely slept. Every moment was haunted by the image I couldn't erase from my mind. I felt like a stranger in my own house, surrounded by people I no longer recognized. The weight of their betrayal was crushing, and I struggled to find a way to cope with the reality I had uncovered. I wanted answers, but I was afraid of what they might say. I felt trapped between confronting them and protecting myself from further pain. The trust that had once been the foundation of our family was shattered, replaced by suspicion and doubt. I knew things could never be the same again. That moment had broken us apart, leaving a gap filled with silence, anger, and sorrow. As I faced the hardest truth I had ever known, I also realized that the journey ahead would be long and painful. It would test every part of me, my strength, my courage, and my ability to forgive. But for now, all I could do was try to breathe and gather the pieces of the broken family I once believed in. The morning after that terrible discovery was the hardest to face. My mind was a storm of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, but beneath it all was a desperate need for answers. I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I had to confront Mark and Ethan, no matter how painful it would be. I decided to talk to Mark first. My voice shook as I asked him directly if what I had seen was true. For a moment, he looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Then he denied everything, said I must have misunderstood, that I was imagining things, that it was just a hug, a moment taken out of context. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But the look on his face didn't match his words. There was guilt there, hidden but unmistakable. My heart ached, torn between my love for him and the painful truth I suspected. Then I turned to Ethan. I hoped his denial would be stronger, his innocence intact. But when I asked him, his response was cold and evasive. He avoided my eyes and gave me vague answers, refusing to admit anything. His silence spoke louder than words, and it crushed me more than any confession could have. The conversations left me feeling more isolated than ever. Both Mark and Ethan acted like they were protecting something, or someone, but that protection came at my expense. I was left out in the cold, abandoned by the two people I trusted the most. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy with tension. I tried to carry on with daily life, but everything felt broken. The dinners were silent, the rooms colder, and the distance between us wider than I had ever imagined possible. I reached out to friends and family for support, but even then, I felt like no one truly understood the pain I was going through. How do you explain something so deeply personal, so devastating? I started doubting myself, wondering if maybe I was overreacting or imagining things. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen, and my heart knew the truth even if my mind struggled to accept it. For days, I wrestled with the betrayal and denial, trapped in a nightmare where the people I loved most were breaking the family apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. The truth doesn't stay hidden for long, especially when it's this painful. Before I knew it, the secret was out. The cracks in our family began to widen, and soon the entire circle of relatives and friends knew what had happened. The news spread like wildfire, each retelling adding more fuel to the fire. Family gatherings became battlegrounds. People took sides, voices were raised, and accusations flew. Some refused to believe what I had seen, defending Mark and Ethan blindly. Others expressed shock and disappointment, questioning how such a betrayal could happen within a family. Mark and Ethan shut themselves off, retreating into a world of silence. They refused to face the fallout or try to mend what was broken. Their denial made the rest of us feel like strangers living under the same roof. The home that once felt safe was now filled with bitterness and blame. My partner's parents stopped speaking to me, convinced I was overreacting or stirring trouble. Friends disappeared, unwilling to get involved in the family drama. Even Ethan's school life was affected, rumors followed him, and he became withdrawn and angry. I felt utterly alone, carrying the weight of betrayal and heartbreak. The family I had dreamed of was falling apart before my eyes. Every day was a painful reminder that what we had built was fragile, too fragile to withstand such a deep wound. Despite the chaos, I tried to stay strong for myself and for any hope that something good could come from this mess. I sought support from counselors and close friends, but the pain was raw and fresh. In moments of quiet, I would look around the house, at the empty chairs, the silence between us, and mourn what was lost. I couldn't help but ask myself how a family could be torn apart so completely by one terrible secret. I still loved Mark and Ethan, but the love was tangled in hurt and confusion. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible or if we could ever find a way back to trust. But deep down, I knew the only way forward was to face the truth, no matter how painful, and decide what kind of future I wanted for myself, and for what was left of my family. After the family feud and heartbreak, I realized that denial and silence wouldn't heal anything. I needed clarity, not just for myself, but to understand the full extent of what had happened. I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it would be. I started quietly searching for answers, piecing together scraps of information. I read through old messages on Mark's phone when I could, noticed secret texts, hidden conversations that confirmed what I feared. The truth was no longer a shadow, it was real, and it cut deeper than I ever imagined. I listened more carefully to their conversations, overheard hushed talks filled with guilt and regret, and watched their interactions closely. The more I learned, the more I understood the complexity of their relationship, how it had started, how it had been hidden, and how it had destroyed everything we once believed in. It was a betrayal layered with emotions, love, confusion, fear, and shame. I realized this wasn't just about infidelity but about broken boundaries and a family caught in a painful web. Every discovery was like reopening a wound, but it also gave me power. I wasn't blind anymore. I saw the situation clearly, and with that came the strength to face it head-on. I began journaling my feelings and talking to a therapist who helped me sort through the confusion. The process was painful, but it was the only way I could begin to heal. I also reached out to a few close friends who had stood by me, sharing pieces of my truth. Their support reminded me I wasn't alone, even when my family felt shattered. Facing the truth forced me to confront my own fears and pain. It meant accepting that the family I dreamed of might never be the same, and that I might have to make hard decisions for my own peace and sanity. But in seeking the truth, I found a sliver of hope, a chance to reclaim my life from the wreckage and maybe, one day, rebuild something honest and strong, no matter what that looked like. After uncovering the painful truth and feeling the weight of betrayal, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The family I had once cherished was in ruins, and now I had to decide what to do next, not just for myself, but for everyone involved. Could I forgive Mark and Ethan? Could I rebuild the trust that had been shattered? These questions haunted me every day. Part of me wanted to hold on to the hope that love could heal even the deepest wounds. But another part was scared of the pain, the lies, and the possibility of being hurt again. I began seeing a counselor regularly. Our sessions helped me understand my feelings and what I truly needed to move forward. It became clear that forgiveness wasn't something I could force, it had to come naturally, and only when I was ready. I talked honestly with Mark and Ethan, trying to understand their perspectives. They showed regret and remorse, but the damage was deep. They couldn't erase the past, and I couldn't forget what had happened. I thought about the impact on Ethan, the stepson caught in the middle of this storm. Was it fair to punish him by breaking the family completely? Or would staying together only prolong the pain and distrust? Friends and family offered their opinions, but ultimately, the decision was mine. I weighed my love for the family I had built against the need for self-respect and peace. After many sleepless nights and heart-wrenching conversations, I made my choice. Whether it was to try to rebuild or to walk away, it was a step toward healing. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I also understood that protecting my emotional well-being was essential. I took small steps, setting boundaries, communicating openly, and giving myself permission to grieve. I accepted that healing takes time and that some scars might never fully fade. Most importantly, I learned to put myself first, not out of selfishness, but out of necessity. Without healing myself, I couldn't hope to fix the family or find happiness again. Making the decision to move forward wasn't easy. Whether I chose to rebuild the family or walk away, I knew life would never be the same. The wounds ran deep, but I also recognized that holding on to bitterness would only keep me trapped in pain. I began focusing on healing, both for myself and for the future. Therapy sessions became my anchor, a safe space to unravel my feelings and rediscover my strength. Slowly, I started to see that while the betrayal had broken us, it didn't have to define my life. If I chose to rebuild, it would take honest conversations, transparency, and a willingness from all of us to face the past without blame. Trust, once broken, is fragile, but not impossible to repair. We would need to set new boundaries and rebuild the family on a foundation of truth. If I chose to separate, it wouldn't be giving up, it would be an act of self-respect and courage. Sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your peace and open the door for new beginnings. I also learned to forgive, not just others, but myself. I realized that none of this was my fault. I had loved wholeheartedly and trusted genuinely. The betrayal was theirs, not mine. Moving forward meant embracing uncertainty and change. It meant accepting that some relationships might heal, others might fade. It meant being kind to myself as I navigated grief, anger, and hope. In the quiet moments, I reflected on what I had learned, about love, trust, and the strength it takes to survive heartbreak. I understood that while families can break, people can also heal and grow stronger. No matter what happens next, I'm determined to live a life where honesty, respect, and self-love guide my path. This story may have broken us apart, but it also taught me the power of resilience. And that, in the end, is where true healing begins.